so much for joining us here today. I really do appreciate it. We do have a good one for you here, as always. And, here's a little bit about what we're going to be getting into on the show today. We're talking a little bit about Virginia, the Walmart team that just took place there recently, and another reminder of the tragic work that we have to do in areas regarding gun control and so much more when it comes to really some of the most important issues of our time, just how short we are focused. Especially we're talking about the situation that took place at Club Q that's in Colorado with the shooting at the gay bar, taking the latest on that. And so it really actually a great piece about why it's so important to be a gay bar in the New York Times, and just being proud of the gay rights kind of struggle and all the things that have been so tough for gay people kind of in their struggle for acceptance over the years. Also, we'll take a look at why the World Cup should make us kind of a rethink of our understanding of human rights here, which I find to be very interesting. And we'll take a look at 10 things Americans actually do have to be thankful for. We're going to do a little bit of rare positivity here from Newsflash on the holiday season. So it is quite a good time to be here. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us on this Thanksgiving show. Apologize for the tardiness of it in nature, but hopefully that does not discourage all from kind of enjoying the show, enjoying what hopefully is a chill holiday, nothing too crazy with the family or anything like that. But with that being said, it is important that we're going to get right into today's show. So we're starting off with a little bit about the shooting taking place recently in Virginia. So that has added to the nation's gun toll just recently. This was last night as we saw shoppers in Chesapeake, Virginia, browsing for household items or Thanksgiving necessities, and an employee of a Walmart in Chesapeake took out a pistol and, without a word, opened fire, killing 5 of his coworkers and a 16-year-old boy before turning the weapon on himself. And it's really, I think it shows you at a very fundamental level just how crazy our country is becoming. And really, I think the sense that a lot of people have that it just there is no way to do, there's no real way, no effective way to control what is happening in a really everyday basis. Well, not every day, obviously, but, an all too common basis in our, in literally every possible place and kind of imaginable in American life. It's just been happening over and over again and again. This is Chesapeake, Virginia this time. The bodies of the gunman and the 2 victims were found in an employee break room, the authorities said, and another near the front of the store. The 3 died after being taken to nearby hospitals. The burst of workplace violence just after 10 p.m. on a Tuesday tore at the Holiday Cheer of a popular shopping center, now cordoned off with yellow police tape. And it threatened the nation again for the 3rd time in less than 2 weeks into a familiar increasingly frequent cycle of mourning, soul-searching, prayer-sending, and finger-pointing in the aftermath of really yet another mass shooting. And this is obviously a very tragic situation. 5 people dead in a Walmart, doing their Thanksgiving shopping. It really is just a sign of, I think, the fact that we as a people and we as a country can't imagine really effectively a world where this does not happen on a day-to-day basis, which is so insane. Where we are literally the only country where this regularly happens. So, it's a real kind of testament to the state of our political institutions, the state of the way things are. Just we are fundamentally unable to create a political system that can fix problems where we see just people being gunned at, kids, just anyone, anywhere, at any time, just not safe from this really awful scourge. I think there is something uniquely horrific, I would say, honestly, about the gay shooting, the gay bar shooting, where 5 people were also killed and 18 others wounded at this Colorado Club Q nightclub. Colorado Springs, for those of you who don't know, it is a very anti-gay area, big military base area, big, with the Mormon church and all that. It is a place where, there is not a lot of room for that kind of expression. Club Q, for all accounts, was a place where there was a lot of acceptance of that. It was a real haven for a lot of queer people. And the fact that really, I think what makes it so uniquely horrific It's not the fact that, unfortunately, it was not the fact that 5 people died. 5 people just died in a Walmart in Chesapeake, Virginia, and probably, I hate to say it, will die in a mass shooting in the near future very soon. But what this is really hit me on another level was just the fact that there, undeniably was one political party who, at least, you don't have to say all the candidates, but a big part of their political, a central tenet of their platform is demonizing queer people and making them into a threat, making them into, an actionable threat time and time again, emboldening them through their policy and moving them, slowly up through the ranks. These people who are literally, have time and time again, they've actively calling people groomers, calling people pedophiles, all this kind of stuff. This, it doesn't, as we saw, it doesn't work electorally very well. Most people, thank God, think this is crazy, but, at least for now. But we saw what this can do. I think this guy doing this thing in a situation like this, shows really just a testament to A, how sick our country is, and B, the fact that we saw, the same people would push this political strategy. At least they didn't have the time to, they didn't have the, hypocritical nature to kind of come in and say, we stand with LGBTQ people after saying, they just left them out completely. And it's in a situation where we had these people who, at least they were honest. They pushed violence. They call these people, and they genuinely believe it. They call these people, heathens. They think they're sick. They think they are outside of a humanity that they believe that, quote unquote, normal people, straight people have, non-trans people have, all that kind of stuff. They literally believe that they are outside of that humanity and that they can essentially do whatever they want. And to those people, they can advocate for, calling them pedophiles. They can call them all these sorts of names. It's incitations to violence. You can have local Republican parties, these like essentially militia groups in Texas, posting every time there's going to be any kind of drag queen story hour or anything like that. And you have a small militia group outside, and that has been going on for I don't even know. Well before the 2022 midterm campaign cycle, but this is a time where explicitly we have real Republican figures, media figures, influential figures coming out and saying it's not that bad. Can they just? And it's making effect. They're news reporters who are reporting getting unprecedented comments like enough with the Club's Q shooting. Let's move on. You're talking about LGBTQ people way too much. You're punishing God is punishing a sin. Like there are people who. I doubt they would get this. I don't even know if they got. After the Buffalo shooting, where black people were targeted in a hate crime. Earlier this year, they didn't. People didn't get those messages. Not to say that there is a real revulsion against it. But there was this instinct of really turning up just at least with mass shootings, not saying any kind of snide remarks, being unified and saying, hey, this is bad. There's the loss of life is bad. Really, the crazy thing, it felt like, watching some of the coverage, watching people, right-wing YouTubers, these influencers who, to the adult, if you're listening to this, say, oh, they're just YouTubers. And so, no, these people have reached, they've influenced millions of people, and they are making these people, they make not caring about the fact that 5 people just got gunned down because they're gay. They make not caring about that okay. They make it seem normal. They make it seem like a normal thing to do. And you've had people come out on Tucker Carlson on Fox News, the most watched cable show in the country. The chances are somebody, you almost certainly know somebody who has watched Tucker Carlson or watches it regularly, or at least knows someone who knows someone. And it just shows you, this guy had somebody on saying, the shootings will continue until the grooming stops, essentially. What do you expect when they're doing this grooming, this pedophilia? These people believe this stuff. They're willing to act on this stuff. And it is so, and I'm not even, part of that LGBTQ community. But, the fact that this is just so really just accepted in a way that I have never seen before. And, all these mass shootings, all this stuff like that, just accepted as okay. And it's just because these people have just been portrayed, for political effect as subhuman outside of, the normal humanity that, you and I, normal Americans would share. That has led to the violence. And that is what is causing this huge uptick. And it's happening right now. It's building, and they are not even turning back on it as 5 people have laid dead. It's really shocking. It's really horrific. And I want to go to this piece here by Lauren Huff, I believe. I believe she's a member of the LGBTQ community. I should do a little Lauren Huff bio. She's an author. She's a New York Times bestseller and essayist, born in Berlin, Germany, and raised in 7 countries, including Amarillo, Texas. She got into a bit of a Twitter feud, and she had to face allegations of transphobia one time with Sandra Newman, back and forth. So this is earlier in March, she published "Leaving Isn't the Hardest Thing." It was set to be nominated for the Lambda Literary Award in the category of Best Lesbian Memoir. The nomination seemed to capstone a remarkable debut in which really won critical acclaim, but then got called as kind of transphobic, and that obviously set up a whole debate that I'm not going to take any sides on. But you can read into that what you may hear on this, and we'll see what she's about in this article. So I think from what I've seen so far, she makes some really kind of interesting and important points in the wake of the Colorado shooting. So, they tell us not to flaunt it, she writes. They tell us not to shove it in their faces. They tell us not to talk about it. They tell us everything would be fine if we just kept it behind closed doors. They tell us these things during Thanksgiving dinner, at Christmas, after the kids have opened their gifts, while the game is on, and we wanted to try to talk, to explain, to give us them a chance to see us, to love us. We don't want to give up just yet. And I mean, that's really just, it's so, I think underappreciated, what it's like in so many parts of the country. We've seen this wave of acceptance for gay rights, which is kind of being met obviously by just this reactionary pushback now in the last few years. But it really is reality for so many people across the country, that homophobia is just really normalized or just believed by so many people. And just the feeling of, these Thanksgiving times where everything's so, contentious for millions and millions of people all across the country. And the fact that, queer culture is so sexualized, not just by, queer people, it's by these, straight people, these reactionaries, these conservatives who are all the time coming out and saying, queer people, they're so sexual. Every time they see a queer people, two boys together, I think of them kissing. It's just disgusting. That's always where they seem to go. And then this rhetoric, it continues to build and build, and get really just built up. So when I heard about the news of the shooting at Club Q, an LGBTQ club in Colorado Springs, I couldn't help but think the rhetoric spewed by those like James Dobson. We know what we're up against. We've heard it growing up in church and at home. We've heard these used words. We've heard the words they use in polite company about loving the sinner and hating the sin. We heard the words they've used when they've been listening to Christian radio or their actual minister or Rush Limbaugh or Fox News about abominations and predators in bathrooms and groomers on the internet, and words they've used when they've had one too many, the names they call those who could be our friends, who could be us. Those words we've heard and we were taught when we were forced to read a whole lot when those words came out of Colorado Springs, the headquarters of Focus on the Family, an evangelical organization whose founder, Mr. James Dobson, wrote books exhorting our evangelical parents on how to deal with strong-willed children, corporal punishment, a little pain goes a long way, and how to raise boys to be suitably masculine, who compared homosexuality to pedophilia, and who once offered a solution to fathers whose young daughters had to share a restroom with trans women. If this had happened 100 years ago today, somebody might have been shot. Where is today's manhood? God help us. This is the kind of rhetoric that's coming out of Colorado Springs. Focus on the Family. All these evangelical Mormon people who are just so big into this kind of religious hatred, and this media propaganda just spreads it and makes it normalized so effectively. It's really amazing. Some of us grew up and escaped to cities where we could feel, if not safe exactly, at least a little less alone. We could find jobs where we didn't have to hide who we were and tell lies about our roommate. We could find friends like us, a new family to replace the ones we've lost. Some of us stayed home or moved home when things didn't work out in the city. But that story's heartwarming only when the main character is a straight executive in a Hallmark movie. Some of us go home for the holidays where we're told to keep behind closed doors. We step outside to walk the dog so they don't see our tears. We call our friends back in the city. Our brother steps out to the porch to tell us when we ask why our family can't just love us It's all about the baby Jesus, because he's the only one who knows how much it hurts, and he's the only one who can still make us laugh about it. I think, just kind of talking about the gay experience, the queer experience in general. Later on, when the kids are sleeping, Mom wants to watch It's a Wonderful Life. Some of us head to the bar. We don't need to know anyone there. We don't need to tag along. We don't need to know if it's a dance night or a drag show. We'll be all right. Just as soon as we walk through those doors, past the bouncer, checking IDs, up to the bar, where the impossibly cute bartender nods to let us know he's seen us. He did see us. Someone finally did. It's been a while. This is where we're safe. For many of us, it's the only place. They told us it would be okay. Behind those closed doors, they'd leave us alone. Often there's a drag show, a fundraiser for a homeless shelter for the queer kids whose parents listened to their evangelical leaders and threw their children out onto the streets. We've heard the panic about drag queens, and it'd be hard not to laugh if we didn't know the intent behind the manufactured panic. Drag queens talk about sex the way politicians talk about thoughts and prayers, and Christians talk about love. Everyone knows they're full of it. Drag queens are in on the joke. If you've ever been to a gay bar on a holiday or ever worked at a gay bar during a holiday, and I have, you get to watch the transformation of every person who walks through those doors. The unwinding of jaw muscles and shoulders and hips that start to roll about halfway across the room, the tone of voice that changes between the front door and the bar. You watch people become themselves. They throw back their first shot, the medicinal shot, then find immediate friends down the bar or out on the patio. It's as beautiful as it is tragic. It's tragic because they were never going to leave us alone. No matter how quiet we kept it, no matter how much we hid it in front of them. The police came into our houses and dragged us out in handcuffs, printed the mugshots in the paper so our bosses and families and neighbors would know what they had told us to keep secret. The military harassed us and threatened us and threw us out, even though it said it wouldn't ask if we didn't tell. They don't want us to feel safe. They don't want us to be safe. Joshua Thurman, in a tearful interview after he survived the shooting last weekend, asked, "Where are we supposed to go?" The Stonewall riots began because they were lying then, too, when they told us to keep it behind closed doors. So we came out in the streets. We fought back. We fought back Saturday night, too. It was club patrons who stopped the gunman, who threw him to the ground and subdued him until the police arrived. And when they arrived, they placed handcuffs on one of those patrons, who said later the police locked him in the police car, briefly preventing him from tending to his family members who may have been wounded. But they weren't, luckily. The police, as an institution, were not built to protect queer people, not when politicians fearmonger about drag queens and bathrooms to rally an evangelical base. We'll protect ourselves. We'll fight for our own. We always have. We'll mourn, we'll raise money, we'll organize, and we'll keep fighting until all of us are safe everywhere. But tonight, I'm going to a gay bar. Maybe there'll be a drag show. So that's Lauren Huff. I think it's a really, really great essay there in the New York Times opinion pages recently, just showing in a very eloquent way the kind of experience of what's been like to be, kind of be gay in this country, especially in some of the more evangelical, Christian, redder parts of the country, which, Colorado Springs certainly is. James Dobson, Focus on the Family, that's all there. So it just shows you really how hard it is. From one human rights story to another. The World Cup is quite a segue here. But, the World Cup is quite an abomination in and of itself. As we watch about the football, it pays not to think too much about the wider environment surrounding football today. It's really just excess greed, ferocious self-interest, and stark inequalities are its guiding principles. Repressive states, intoxicated on the rewards of fossil capital, now use the sport as a pawn in their geopolitical game, while fans market useless and ethically corrupt NFTs to their millions of fans. While players market useless and ethically corrupt NFTs to their millions of fans. Football kind of becoming more and more money grabby, more and more money hungry in a big way. In the face of this depressing scene, it's been encouraging to see several football associations and many international players take a stand on human rights in the lead up to the World Cup in Qatar. Surely no spectator can watch this World Cup without knowing the desperate plight of migrant workers, the repression of women in everyday life, and the crackdowns of freedom of the press and punishment of LGBTQ people. Whether spectators care or not is a different question, of course. But the signs are that the football teams would prefer the World Cup are not taking place in a country with such a terrible human rights record. The International Federation of Association Football, FIFA, of course, would rather we all focus on the game itself. As if football was somehow divorced from the, 6,500, people who died to, put the field together and, build all the stadiums. It's even blocked the Danish football station from printing "Human Rights for All" on its training shirts, which is pretty crazy. The sports governing body has rightly been castigated for its attempt to stop associations, players, and fans from voicing their opinions on the human rights abuses in Qatar. But a challenging question lurks in the background. What does a term like "human rights for all" really mean? We reflexively employ the term human rights as if it can nullify any moral argument. But how can many of us can say we truly know exactly what we mean when we utter the words human rights? Which I think is a very interesting point. So human rights have had a pretty contested and complicated history. In her seminal 1951 book, The Origins of Totalitarianism, Hannah Arendt, the philosopher, identified what she called the right to have rights, which in the context of Jewish persecution during World War II only came about when there suddenly emerged millions of people who had lost and could not regain these rights because of the new political situation. Arendt obviously had some pretty personal experience. As a Jew, she was forced to flee from Germany to Paris in 1933 after the Nazi invasion of France in 1940. She managed to find her way to the United States, where she was granted citizenship in 1951. Her point about the right to have rights was that in order to actually possess rights, a human being has to belong to some kind of political community, usually citizenship of a nation state. Simply being human enough is not itself. The chilling truth of Arendt's assertion is also evident today when we talk about the migrant workers, the people who are just so poor in a nation that is so weak that they don't have, really, by any, standard definition, human rights, even though they are human. Which leads to the very people who are in desperate need of rights that lack the very right to have rights. Unquestionably, many of the rightless people who have toiled in the building sites of the stadiums in Qatar that will host this forthcoming or, in progress World Cup. Arendt's idea applies that the concept of human rights is not quite straightforward as we make out. Whereas FIFA tells us to leave the politics out of the World Cup, we often leave the politics out of human rights. But the ways in which we use language of human rights today is historically contingent. Human rights are pretty much always wrapped up in the ideological and political struggles of the second half of the 20th century. Because collective and individualistic worldviews, social welfare and market freedom and social democracy and neoliberalism and all that, those kind of ideas came to be at that time. The human rights that we invoke in debates about the World Cup are representative of, rather than antithetical to, the victory of individualism, market freedom, and neoliberal capitalism in these political struggles. So, the rights are different comparatively to, the system that we are in. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, adopted by the UNGA on the back of the horrors of World War II, was a non-binding declaration that, recognized that the inherent dignity and of equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family is the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace of the world. So they set out a general standard of human rights. For the first time in any substantive sense, they included economic and social rights, like the right to housing, food, and education. The inclusion of such rights in the UDHR not only indicated an emphasis on social welfare in the wake of the Great Depression, but also reflected the strength of labor movements of the mid-20th century. And the work of the next 2 decades was, turning these standards into binding obligations, obviously. So, those human rights are kind of defined by the UDHR, and then they were split in December 1966 into 2 covenants for all these kind of member nations that joined the UN. So the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights dealt with what we can broadly describe as individual rights. For example, freedom from torture and slavery, procedural fairness in the face of the law, freedom of movement, thought, and speech. Those were largely rights that could be secured through legal frameworks and could be generalized across national borders in some shape or form. The International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights was a little bit more tricky. It focused on collective rights such as the right to free education, healthcare, to join labor unions, and to have social security, paid parental leave, and an adequate standard of living. To enforce such rights required government resources to intervene in the free market and allocate resources in fair and equitable ways. Because of this requirement, the rights were much more beholden to the vagaries of nation-state politics than were civil and political rights. Notably, in the context of the Cold War, the United States did not ratify the International Covenant on Economic and Social Rights and has not done so for this day. Human rights in the era of neoliberalism changed it relatively significantly. Crucially, by the time each covenant became effective in 1976, the swinging 60s and its economic boom had given way to the stagflationary 70s and a global oil crisis. And a lot of the kind of political and economic order of the West looked to be in trouble. Strong welfare states, high taxation systems, and wealth redistribution policies have not prevented economic downturns and their associated social ills, such as unemployment and growing poverty. A new neoliberal counter-order was emerging in which many intellectuals, politicians, and policy advisors saw the possibility of using individual civil and political rights to protect against collective and economic and social rights. Samuel Moyn, a historian, pinpoints the 1970s as the starting point of the human rights revolution, especially with the rapid rise of organizations like Amnesty International. But as he points out, the most extraordinary fact about this human rights revolution from the perspective of ideals about how to distribute the good things in life is that with some key exceptions, it unceremoniously purged the attention of economic and social rights, and really almost using that first point, the cultural, political rights, the right to speak your mind and post about whatever you want and be yourself, truly be that great little you that you can be. That was used to say, almost create this kind of illusion of complete, total, and utter freedom when it really comes to economic rights, economic tools that you have in your arsenal to better yourself. Those rights were being rapidly taken away. After the fall of the Soviet Union, many countries in the global north introduced some legal frameworks for the implementation of economic and social rights, but those paled in comparison to the frameworks on civil and political rights. Moreover, without strong welfare states, redistributive policies, and powerful labor movements, which had been dismantled under the ascendant neoliberalism of the 1980s, there were effectively few political or social structures to disseminate economic and social rights. Unsurprisingly, the economic and social rights were anathema to the neoliberal intellectuals of the mid-20th century, who viewed them as curtailing rather than facilitating human freedom. In a remarkable book, The Morals of the Market, Jessica White charts the intertwining histories of modern human rights and neoliberalism. As White puts it, the challenge for neoliberals was to overcome the egalitarianism of communal cultures and the assumption that basic welfare was a right, and to instill the morals of the market and a culture of individual rights, as almost contrary to the idea of actually having economic rights that you can rely on and come back to again and again. The neoliberals saw the potential in civil and political rights as a way to guard against economic and social rights. As Milton Friedman, for example, argued, poverty rights are not in conflict with human rights. On contrary, they themselves are the most basic of human rights and an essential foundation for other rights. I said poverty rights. The right to not to be in poverty. You may have thought it's what I misread it. He said property rights are not in conflict with human rights. On the contrary, they're themselves the most basic of human rights and essential foundation for other human rights. So, what if we take, shouldn't everyone have property? If that's all right, Milton Friedman, what do you think about that, bud? No. But by placing individual rights, like the right to private property, above all forms of collective rights, neoliberalism, really effectively used the language of human rights to insist that any policy of wealth redistribution on social welfare was effectively a violation of an individual's right to get rich and own some property. And that kind of, distinction, that, kind of definition of what's going on here, even as we look to, there's so many other countries, people like Gianni Infantino being like, Europe has some apologizing to do. Well, really it's Milton Friedman and the neoliberal era that has some apologizing to do for fundamentally disconnecting the idea that, rights mean not just being able to, be able to speak freely, be able to protest, be able to, read whatever you want in a newspaper, be able to post whatever you want online. They also mean being able to join a union, being able to economically better yourself with your fellow, working class people, and actually being able to have that freedom of assembly, economic, social rights, are really, really important. My name is Spencer Walsh. This is the Spencer Walsh Radio Network, and if you're listening to one of our podcasts, whether it's Newsflash, Hidden History, The Spencer Walsh Show, or something else, ladies and gentlemen, we have one simple request of you. Please be sure to rate us, subscribe to us if you like us, and leave us a comment, because just like all of you, sometimes we need that feedback in our lives, good or bad. We want to hear what you have to say. So please do those steps. Make SWR and content better. And thank you so much for listening. All right, gentlemen. Boy, oh boy, do I have a treat for you, because today we're about to close up the show with a wonderful John Schwartz article about 10 things to be thankful for this Thanksgiving. A little bit of rare positivity for a change here on Newsflash. we start with Elon Musk because, boy, has this guy been incredible. Schwartz writing here, God bless this dork. Seriously, no one in history has so clearly demonstrated that the ultra-wealthy who run the world have absolutely no idea what they are doing. Generally, they're smart enough to remain hidden behind the failings of their, money and guns, and only ever giving interviews to like CNBC, and people would just absolutely love them and would fawn over them at any opportunity. But with Musk's purchase of Twitter, he was willing to come out and shout, "Here we go, into the future," and then trip down his shoelaces and fall down about 900 flights of stairs. Of course, there's a downside here. A prominent linguist named Edward Sapir wrote this in a book published in 1921. Everything that we have so far seen to be true of language points to the fact that it is the most significant and colossal work that the human spirit has evolved. Language is the most massive and inclusive art we know, a mountainous and anonymous work of unconscious generations. This is true about language, and on a smaller scale is, true about Twitter. Twitter is a colossal work of art produced by hundreds of millions of people working together for free with no particular goal in mind. They just all had a burning need to share their miscellaneous thoughts with the universe. So will be terrible, really, if Musk destroys Twitter, akin to Julius Caesar setting the Library of Alexandria on fire. I don't know. I don't know about that. But, there really was some great moments on Twitter. Seriously, I think it is, kind of crazy. I do think it's kind of crazy that, we're, seeing all these people do so many historical moments on Twitter, so many funny moments that people have just, really kind of used Twitter, would kind of get into and appreciate. But I think, the world will survive without Twitter. It may even be, a bit of a better place. But I think the best thing that Elon Musk has done is really, prove to a lot of people, or at least given people who want to make this point more often, such as myself, a good, perfect example, a case study in how billionaires are not the most effective runners of every single part of our society. Kind of showing them really the true nature of the situation. So, a belief in the legitimacy of elections allows humans to live with one another without intermittent mass slaughter. Which is kind of a nice thing to have. Makes things a little bit more peaceful most of the time. At least for us here in this country. In 2020, Donald Trump decided that this was less important than his feelings getting hurt. It's never been exactly clear who he claims rigged the election. Diebold, Chavez, Dark Elves. But he's convinced about 70% of Republicans that Joe Biden was not, in fact, elected president. This is extremely bad news. The U.S. electoral system is a kludge kind of designed off really on 1787 by 39 delegates, just 39, to the Constitutional Convention, who were driven largely by an understandable desperation to leave Philadelphia. It is a janky, Rube Goldberg-esque machine filled with metaphorical dynamite that has generally failed to explode, thanks to minimal good faith on all sides. But in 2022, many Republicans ran for positions that control the election machinery, promising that they won. They would, kind of set this dynamite off. They would use those figures. They would actually say, for example, mail-in ballots, who needs them? We don't have to count them. It's no big deal. We get to make these decisions. All these areas where we can run for Secretary of State or become a governor that gets to appoint the Secretary of State that has a huge input on elections in key swing states, we're going to run for those positions. But the good thing is things have kind of, America's come to its senses and decided they still want to have functioning elections. And, it looks like they'll be going around for at least a little while longer. This is a good one here. Schwartz writing, at the funeral for my wonderful uncle 9 years ago, the priest explained that the first time he met every parishioner, he asked them what they liked to do most. My uncle responded that his favorite life activity was thinking. Man, did I feel that. I someday hope that someone will say about me that someone will say that about me at my funeral. The point is that, reality is busy and bizarre, so multifaceted that pondering it will keep you busy and happy for over 100 years. For instance, when a woman is born, her ovaries contain every egg she will ever have. This means that half the genetic material consists of was once inside your maternal grandmother's body. Can you believe that? Also, it is kind of sad for John that his uncle, rest in peace to John's uncle, gotta say that. John Schwartz, rest in peace to your uncle. Life in 2022 America suggests that Buddhists are really onto something with the concept of the hungry ghost. Hungry ghosts are the remnants of dead humans who are afflicted with the insatiable desires that, for whatever reasons, they can't satisfy. The Canadian writer John Ralston Saul has said that made an interesting argument that Christianity, Islam, capitalism, communism, and Nazism all prosper through the cultivation of desire of the great world myths. Only Buddhism is centered on the reduction of desire in the individual. Is this true? I don't know. But if it is, Buddhism may be the only path forward for the survival of the Homo sapiens sapiens. On the other hand, widespread Buddhism would cause the entire world economy to collapse, so it's a bit of a mixed bag. But hey, maybe we need to start over again. We'll see what happens. One of my favorite things about Twitter is thriving community surrounding the 2007 movie Michael Clayton. If you've seen Michael Clayton, you already know this. If you haven't, please notify me so I can come over to your house to watch it with you, pausing it every 30 seconds to point out my favorite parts. So I've never seen this movie. But Michael Clayton was written by Tony Gilroy. Now he's taken his gargantuan talent and used it to make Andor, a Disney Plus prequel to Rogue One. It's different to, understand how he was allowed. It's kind of difficult to understand how he's allowed to do this. An honest log line for it would have had to read, what if all the classic Star Wars movies turned out to be childish fantasies masking unbearable tragedy, plus it cost hundreds of millions of dollars, It was kind of weird, what they've done to Star Wars, how they've made it modernized and kind of, in the 2017 era versus the 2022 era. But, I've heard some good things about Andor. It's been reviewed by some kind of people I like in a positive way. So I may watch it, in the run-up to the holiday season. Comptrollers. Big shout out to Comptrollers. John Schwartz wants us to do. Big also, by the way, shout out to Kenneth Mejia. We talked about him recently on the show. He has been amazing in LA. And by the way, pay attention to some Comptrollers. If you want a race to get excited about, find a smart left-wing guy or woman or non-binary person and get them out there, get them running, get them in control of your municipality's finances and make it, help make the world a better place. So here's what we are going to go for our next one. It's a little bit kind of controversial, but radish powder, cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower, all that stuff, they're incredibly enough. All these cruciferous vegetables are cultivated descendants of a single plant, the Brassica oleracea. And all of them contain two precursors that turn into a sulforaphane when you eat the plants raw. Sulforaphane, if you're a barbarian who doesn't know, appears to be one of the healthiest things you can imbibe. It may have cancer-suppressing, anti-inflammatory, anti-diabetic properties. The problem is that cooking destroys one of the sulforaphane precursors. Hence, if you delicious steamed broccoli, you're getting far less sulforaphane than if you eat raw broccoli, which is, unfit for human consumption. But radish powder contains the precursor and is tasteless. All you need to do is sprinkle some on your broccoli with some garlic sauce, and it tastes just as good as eating the broccoli completely cooked. So, radish powder, worth an investment. That's another interesting one. Taylor Swift, on the assumption that, most people have eaten too much turkey and fallen asleep before getting to this part of the article, I'm going to admit here that I love Taylor Swift. I think she displays consistent craft in her songwriting, all right? I see the judgy faces you're making, and I reject it. You drew stars around my scars, but now I'm bleeding. John Schwartz, getting into his girl dad era, I think, with his love of Taylor Swift there. That's, certainly a fair point, but, there are much more creative songwriters. There are much more creative musicians out there, in my opinion, than Taylor Swift. Though she has done some good stuff in the past. That's my take. Some things I personally am thankful for is honestly college. I would have to say that, just a little thing to kind of close out on my own is, just a little bit of my own original idea that I'm thankful for. College is, it's proven to be a pretty good place. And I think to any of you out there who may, I don't know who listens to this, honestly, probably no one, but if you want to, at least I'm about like a year and a half into college at this point. It's been going pretty well so far, and I just, I'm thankful for it because it just really represents a, remarkable opportunity to get the final experience or first experience really of being away from home for the first time. I think that, unless you go to a boarding school, which, I personally wouldn't recommend, but unless you go to a boarding school, that is, your first experience, your first time to really get out there, see how you handle yourself on your own. And what comes with a lot of challenges is really, really cool because I think once you do it, it's so much better than, being at home. And you feel like, especially if you stricter parents, it's like, how did I ever even, live with all those rules in the first place? Is sometimes, what it feels like. So with that being said, anyone who's out there applying to college at the moment, just know, I would say it's all going to be absolutely fine. You're going to have a wonderful time wherever you go. just remember, it's 4 years of your life where you're just in a literal bubble. Essentially, if you're, you may end up with a lot of debt, but if you're blessed to not have to pay, or pay a minimal amount of debt back, just have a good time, enjoy it, and try and get an education while you're there as well. Because those 4 years, I feel like I'm a year and a half into it now, and I feel like it's just something that you will not be experiencing in terms of experience in nature, good or bad. You will never experience anything quite like that in your life again. All right, have a happy Thanksgiving, everyone. We'll be back Friday. Try to do an episode on Friday. Recover some from the turkey, the food coma, some Black Friday news. All right, have a good Thanksgiving and holiday, everybody.